Bill, man, you are like, first of all, I'm a huge fan, and
Aw.
yeah, no joke. And we have been like our paths through the galaxy have somehow always been so intertwined. I love that. We are brothers from another mother. We love
Yeah.
telling stories. We love getting the word out about what people are doing. I got my start in covering music stuff. You've covered music, and now you're covering more with Smokestack. I want to get into that. But I want to just start with, what is it that you love about Kitsap County and Bremerton? Like, why are you attracted to staying here? You could go anywhere and do anything you want, as far as I'm concerned. What is it about our community that draws you in?
That's the funny answer. That's why I laugh so much. Because I've thought about that as well. I came from the desert, as you know, many years ago. I was 18 and left my hometown because I had to get out, like some people do. And I landed here. And I kind of stayed here, and then made the decision of like, if I'm going to go anywhere else, I better go now. And if not, then you're going to stay here till your kids finish school. And so that's always kind of been a question in the back of my mind, like, why, out of all the places you could slingshot yourself to, would you end up here? And it tied back to a history of my family. So my ancestry, all I know is one keychain that somebody had gathered a knickknack along the way. And you would ask about your family history, like, hey, mom and dad, like, where are we from? And that keychain was from Copenhagen, Denmark. And that's all any of the adults seem to know. Oh, all we know is this keychain from Denmark. So that's all I knew of my family history for the longest time. And in landing in Bremerton, and then researching that history, I realized that maybe it's an ancestral thing. The climate and the land features and the fjords and the farmland is almost identical to Denmark. And so that's not necessarily why I stayed here, but I think that's what brought me here.
That's awesome. We had similar paths here. You and me share the same first job.
Yeah.
Out of the gates, we came to Kitsap County, and we came through Paulsville, Washington, to a little paper called the North Kitsap Herald.
Think globally, write locally.
That's right. It was on the wall at the North Kitsap Herald. And you get in, and I know you drove from Wyoming. You came here from Wyoming. So,
in a three-piece suit, also.
In a three-piece suit. You interviewed with Joe Irwin, and he hired you. And tell me about that experience. What it was like to land here, like when you, with fresh eyes.
So he told me I didn't have to dress that fancy. It's just a newspaper. I had my suit on, I had my hat, and he's like, yeah, like I see what you're trying to do and stuff, but this is the P&W. You don't gotta. But the thing that landed the job was I had a separate pen, right? You always have your pen as a journalist, right? And if that pen doesn't work, and you're like, oh no, my pen's dead, but you pull out another one, Joe said, you're hired.
That's awesome. That's such a great story. That's such a great story. And you always do. You always have your pen. And you carry it in a very unique way, underneath your hat.
You never know.
You never know. So tell me about that, because as a writer, you're a writer. Is that just, you got to be Johnny on the spot, or what's the story there? Like, you just got to make sure that you always have your pen.
Yeah.
And it got you the job. That's
got me the job. I think that might have something to do with it, right? I'm still not like a writer, Josh. Like, I'm still learning, And at that point, I'd worked in newspapers for a year or two, kind of lucked into it, as I would say, because I had to get a job at a young age, and I didn't want to go to the mines, the shipyard. I didn't want to go to the railroad, the Boeing. And so I landed in beverages. I worked for Pepsi, and it was a warehouse job, and I did it, and did what was expected, and I started to climb the thing, and so I moved into grocery stores, right? Where you're stocking the shelves and ungodly hours, kind of like journalists, but different. Like you had to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning, got off at noon or whatever, which was cool, but it was not for me. And so I was looking at a life situation that said you have to find a career. You're 18, you just got out of high school, you can't go to college. I mean, you could have, but you turned it down. So yeah, you better find yourself a career. And so I walked. It was like a couple blocks from my house because I walked there. You know, I walked down to my town newspaper, and I had this premeditated in my mind, but they didn't know. And I walked in, and I told the lady at the counter, "I'm gonna be your sports writer." It's like a Wednesday afternoon or whatever. She's like, "Excuse me, do you want to like deliver newspapers?" And it's like, "Oh no, I've done that. Like, I think I'm gonna be your sports writer." And she was like dumbfounded a little bit, you know. She didn't really know what to think. She was kind of, "I'm going to pass you off to somebody else," is her thought. So she did, and she passed me off to the editor. And I went in and told him the same thing. And it just so happens that their sports writer had just put in his 2 weeks because he was going to go teach English in China, somewhere in the East. And he told me the reason that he had gotten there, he was from LA. His name was Justin Jimenez, Jimenez. I don't know if he's written anything since. But he had landed in Wyoming, of all places, Green River, Wyoming, because he was looking for work as a community journalist. And then he realized, like, well, this ain't going to pay the bills. And so he left and left them in a lurch. And here I am. I said, well, I went to high school here. You know, I can talk to the coaches. I can write your sports pages. And I tagged all my stuff as sports writer. And the second in command, which was the editor's assistant or something, you're not a writer, you're an editor. You run the whole page. And that baffled my mind. So that was my start in journalism. I got here and I've still been learning this entire time since.
Yeah.
I've still been in school.
That drive from Wyoming to Paulsville.
Yeah, 14 hours.
Yeah,
14 and a half.
Something like that, okay. And you get here, you work at the Herald. I know also that you're just a creative mind and you love playing music. You're a brilliant musician as well. And I was wondering if there's something that you share. First of all, what is your sort of music background, but how does that sort of overlap, you think, with why you love to write?
I think there's a story at some point. I worked for the craft beer industry for a long time. And there was a story in there that I'd run into a friend at the brewery that I worked at and his significant other at the time. And I was telling that story about like, oh yeah, no, I'm a writer, but I'm just working at a brewery for a while. And his partner said, well, where did the words go? And instinctively, without even thinking, I said, well, they went into the songs. You know, so it's like I've always had words pouring out of me in different degrees or mannerisms or publications or whatever you call it. But I think they're entwined in that way, you know. Words and stories and meanings and that whole thing about why are we here has always been like pouring out of every orifice, just wherever you can catch it.
You are curious. That's right. Exactly. You're curious in the kindest way. That's what I love about you. You have this amazing talent of, I think people open up to you because of you ask them, but in a very unabrasive, very friendly manner. And they want to talk to you. They want to tell their story, and you write it. And I'm just wondering, like, you bounced around after the Herald. You went into beer making. I think you did some, had a stint even on the oil fields. If you want to talk about that.
Checkered past.
But you know, but coming back to everything was, you got back into the writing, and I want to delve into that. How did that happen?
That never goes away. You know that, and I think you're about to find it out even more. It just resurfaces in different ways, you know?
Yep.
And sometimes you can snuff it out. You can make it go away, but it never goes away on its own. you know, and whatever you can do to kindle the fire, no matter how small or how big, whether you're throwing pallets on an already burning fire or you're feeding twigs to a small fire, like the fire doesn't go out until you let it or make it. So I think that's kind of how that goes, you know, and it comes and it goes in waves. It does, you know, and it comes in flames, it comes in embers, it comes in ashes sometimes.
How did Smokestack, speaking of ashes, tell me about Smokestack. How did you come up with the title? Where did it come from?
Do you not know the story?
I need you to tell me the story.
Dude, you don't know this one?
Well, I think it's important.
Do you know some of it?
I know some of it, yeah. But
So you know about North Kitsap Herald?
Yeah, I want the whole thing.
Do you know about the ending of North Kitsap Herald?
Let's hear it.
Or the beginning of Smokestack? I mean, which one do you want to talk about?
I think we need to go bookend to bookend.
The Smokestack came from people doing stuff, man. And that's where it is right now, which is getting closer to its purest form. It is all about people doing stuff in their town, making a difference in their day-to-day, face-to-face, phone call to phone call, text to text, art to art enthusiast, or I don't know, just people doing stuff, you know, the stuff that we do every day. And the thing that frustrated me to no end about journalism was being told you can't do that story. I've got this great story about this person that is doing this thing and nobody really knows about it, but they're doing it and it's awesome and they're very passionate about it, and that passion is the story.
Yeah.
And well, you can't tell that because of extraneous forces. You can't tell that because of what that might mean to somebody else. And so the Smokestack came out of the fact that like everybody's story is worth being told. I get told a lot when I ask people, hey, can I interview you for Smokestack? You know, and I'm like, well, why me? You know, my life is so boring. I just go to work every day. We all do, and that's what makes us all so interesting, is what we do on our day-to-day. What you had for breakfast, you know, what are you doing after this? You know, what do you do on your day-to-day outside of whatever you create, outside of whatever job you do? Like, tell me about you. That's what makes us all human, and that's what makes it so important. So that's what it was born of.
Well, I love it. You and I obviously share the passion of journalism, Smokestack, at a time when journalism, in my mind, is really under attack. You know,
Yeah.
financially,
Yeah.
politically, and
Massively.
yes, but you're blunting that. You're doing everything you can to fight back against that. Why is it important to you that we have this particular mouthpiece, this particular outlet, this Smokestack in Kitsap?
Smokestack is secondary. I think it's very important to write things down. I think it's very important to remember things. That's why I always carry a notebook, so I can remember that later, tomorrow, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 140 years from now. We were doing that. There was a cool one. I don't know if you have this one, but there was a cool one that the Charleston Music Venue was celebrating one of their anniversaries. And it was kind of one of those where it came to the committee or the board or the meeting room. It's like, well, we got to do a story on the Charleston with their anniversary. And it's like, well, that story's been told so many times. They're rad kids that grew up here and they're doing something for their community. Like, everybody knows that. So how do we look at that in a new light? Well, what if we look at it in an old light? And so we went back and researched that building, right? Because the story of the people had been told and their history and what they're doing. And that was early on in this volume 2. God, I can't remember. I think it was April. It had to have been April because that's their anniversary. In the April edition, which would have been number 3, maybe number 4. And it clicked of like, well, who's going to read these things 100 years from now, right? You know, I'm trying to draw back all the knowledge of when that building had been there. And we chased it through all these paper documents in the library. And right now we have all these documents on the internet, but those can go away in a minute. And they actually have a half-life where they're going to go away at some point. But that paper that lives on the library shelf never goes away. So it's important to put that stuff down on paper to say, hey, we were here. We were doing stuff.
So to that end, what is the future of Smokestack?
More people doing stuff, you know? Hopefully a Josh Farley column and maybe some interviews before quiz night. Or, no, that's the future, I would hope, which is funny to say the future is a print publication. Like who would have guessed that a print publication would be happening right now in 2022, 2023, and people are getting behind it and saying, yes, this is important. I think we're all kind of realizing that like, that's important.
It is. Yeah, I love the idea of a newspaper as the hub of community conversation. You do a calendar.
Always. That's one of the biggest drivers.
Calendar features. You did a crossword. Are these all just passion projects from your mind, or is there more of a method to that method?
Oh, the whole method is the calendar. It's giving people the information so they can better participate in their community. That's the part of the hub, you know, because it's all there. We could all go out there today, right now, we could go out there and find out, oh, well, what's going on tonight? I'm going to have to go to this social media page, and I don't really want to do that. Well, I'll find this one, but there's some you don't know of, you know? And so that's what makes this a more important hub. It's all in one place. Whether you know it or you don't know it, it's all right there. And that gives you more ammunition. No, it gives you more ability to participate in your community, which is what makes it stronger, just like you said.
Absolutely. Any parting words for us tonight? I just want to make sure that you're just a fascinating guy, and I know that I probably have missed some stuff. So, what else do you want to say? You want to type some more? Come on. I love the shirt, by the way.
I just want to say, don't forget to have fun, Josh.
It's always all about that.